Ferguson's A to W Encyclopedia of Unpopular Music. The music of people who don't know any better. Written by Ezekiel Zeus Ferguson, including unaccredited contributions from Godly Ferguson and Pervo Ferguson Jr. Time for a little whiskey. Intro, Seduction. As long ago as 2.5 years before the dawn of time, somewhere around 3.5 BC, probably about 3:36 p.m., Harry Scrotum, ancient philosopher, and until then one of the brainiest bastards ever, published the universally ignored Unpopuletics, a 29-volume collection of self-indulgent ramblings with pop-up pornographic pictures and a free pen. A bit like this lot of old twaddle, actually. The book attempted to describe the enormous difference between popular music and a sort of music-like thing forgotten by modern historians. Except for one afternoon in 1930 when Cecil Sharphouse remembered it for 2 minutes while waiting for a bus and then forgot it again. In Unpopuletics, Scrotum wrote, "This music is shite. I mean, fucking hell. I'd rather listen to that other shite than this shite. And that really is shite, isn't it?" It is not clear exactly what the fuck he was talking about, or who the hell he thought he was talking to, but it is generally accepted that this bizarre statement is the earliest documented reference to a musical phenomenon which has both intrigued and annoyed music lovers from just before the dawn of time to just after the present moment. Such was the impact of this music on the young Scrotum that he continued to prattle on about it even after his death, and his views have often been rehashed by musicologists and other knobheads who know fuck all about anything but pretend to know every fucking thing about every fucking thing. This music, known as unpopular music, sometimes referred to as complete bollocks, has helped to produce some of the worst of today's jazz, techno, funk, and has contributed little to today's popular culture. It has been ignored by some of the world's most sensible composers, musicians, and producers, and has not inspired a single artist to create anything of value, although a few married ones have come up with a good tune or two. Thus, it could be said that unpopular music has had absolutely no impact on the music of the modern world and is unworthy of inclusion in such a magnificent documentary as this. Indeed, I wouldn't even mention it, but my agent said this shit might sell to dickheads like you, and God knows I could do with the money. The phenomenon of unpopular music was born just outside of Wedlock, a small fishing town in northern England. Its birth was a difficult and painful process, leaving its mother with bleeding hemorrhoids and 3 stitches in the minge, which started when a group of slaves were shipped to America and forced to work in a rubber clothing factory. The unfortunate group later moved to a clothing factory made of concrete and metal, and it was here, or thereabouts, that they began a whole musical tradition without even knowing it. The daft bastards. The real story of unpopular music began in the early part of the 18th century with the widespread dissemination of cack culture and the subsequent trend for all things audibly awful. It was then that the music accidentally stumbled into the Appalachian Mountains, where it climbed to the top, looked around for a while, slipped on a straight turn and fell down the other side. From there it hopped to Oklahoma, limped through Kentucky and was arrested in Texas for trying to cross the Mexican border with a coal miner. It then became a prostitute in California, caught a venereal disease in Nashville, ran naked through Alabama, and somehow ended up in Georgia with a nasty rash, a sore arse, and $50 in his back pocket. As the century continued, unpopular music joined a travelling medicine show which performed along the banks of the Mississippi River to small audiences, made up largely of seamen and fish. It then worked as a bootlegger for the notorious gang leader, Big Alf Hooker, moved to Detroit for health reasons, gambled up in Washington, opened a doo-doo church in New Orleans, sailed from New York, and died in Liverpool, not far from where it started. What a waste of fucking time. Modern unpopular music has its roots in the vaudeville, or shit, theatre of 18th century America, and in the travelling minstrel shows of that period. Many shit performers, such as the Floating Widgets and Al Bastardo, known as That Bloke with the Limp, enjoyed considerable failure, and several unpopular acts, including Little Dick Head and Gertie Gusset Muncher even managed to cut a few records, though it might have been better if they had cut their throats instead. The 1914 recording God This Is Dogshit Blues by Emmett Globule and his Alabama Rent Boys caused overwhelming anger, but somehow prepared the way for recordings that were even more buttock-clenchingly bad. The public's reaction to Globule's record inspired millions of pretentious twats such as Fanny Tickler, Jack Goth and Willie Watcher to make complete arseholes of themselves and get paid for it instead of working for a living. Such was the degree of failure enjoyed by these pioneers of puerile pop that many of the worst artists, including Dick Smott, Kit Schicker and Pat Gently, were cheerfully beaten to death by angry mobs of music lovers. It has been argued, but only by me, that the recorded history of unpopular music started in 1823 when Ed Cabbage, Doc Watsup, Weepy Johnson and Droopy Brewer made what has now become a legendary recording under the name The Bandit Country Bum Boys. Although this untitled tune had no musical value, it became a worldwide hit and started the craze for unpopular music after it was released as a practical joke by Vulva Records producer Dickie Tummy. Perhaps it might have been better if Mr. Tummy had been hit worldwide instead. Doc Watsup was born prematurely, a habit he continued throughout his life, and was admired for his lovely curly hair, despite being completely bald-headed. He grew up in a stable environment, as his father was a horse, and was a very popular boy, especially with the ladies. In 1888 he formed his first group, the Six Pastels, and began touring the Midwest. Unfortunately, the group was touring the East Coast at the time. It was on the East Coast that the legendary buffoon I.J.K. enters the story, in his pyjamas and looking somewhat bewildered. K, or Nobby, as he should have been known, was an entrepreneur who was directly responsible for very little and is hardly worth mentioning. Why he is included here is anybody's guess, really. By the late 1920s, I.J.K.'s music had spawned a host of shitty hillbilly groups and spearheaded the genre that became known as Shitty Billy, which evolved into the more tasteful Silly Billy. This inspired the altogether more wholesome Sensibilly and the more recent Forgettabilly, each of which sounds exactly the same as the others. Fucking shite. Of slightly less importance to the development of unpopular music is Pop Combo, the Lowbrows, who played a smaller, perhaps insignificant role by introducing anal whistling into the early 1920s. However, the annoying Tossers, as they were later known, were too fat to be included in this documentary, and are therefore not mentioned, except for that bit just then. And this bit, and possibly another bit coming up in a bit. Just as the Lowbrows, that bit, and their obnoxious leader, Hugh Genitals, are recognised as the men who put rock and roll on the musical map, so are Big Dickie Doorknob and Suffering Jesus McGinty, renowned for leaving a nasty stain on the musical landscape, although neither of them has ever been recognised as a man. Together, these two artists, if they can be called that, and they probably can't, single-handedly provided the backbone of unpopular music, albeit one with a yellow streak. And while Doorknob went on to fade into obscurity, it is regrettable that McGinty died before this could happen. It is also regrettable that a duo of such insignificance should be represented in a documentary of this magnitude, and why this has happened is a fucking mystery. Fortunately, these arseholes are not the only exclusion from Ferguson's Encyclopedia of Unpopular Music. The piss-poor heritage of unpopular music contains several different styles, characters and tales, and great efforts have been made to ignore as much of it as possible. This encyclopedia does, however, explore the seedy back alleys and laybys taken by many untalented pricks in their effort to unpopularise their music. It diverts into Paris and Ireland, follows the various trails that were trod, and steps in the same shit that was stepped in during the creation of a unique and crap musical style, one that has played no role whatsoever in the development of popular music. Despite its insignificance, unpopular music has long, perhaps too long, been recognised as the Western world's native, or should I say naive? Probably not. And I'm sorry for mentioning it. Music. The music of people who don't know any better, but never has it seemed so dull as in Ferguson's Encyclopedia of Unpopular Music. presented here for the first and last time in all its naked glory, genital warts and all. This undervalued, and rightly so, music contains many elements that are as different and varied as the crap you hear on television is from the shit that the radio pumps out all day long. It is a much loathed genre which contains all the abandon of an undisciplined group of inbreds at a crack party, and includes a range of so-called artists and entrepreneurs, some of whose stories are fully misrepresented in this encyclopedia. This nasty little documentary, the first incomprehensive encyclopedia of unpopular music, will annoy newcomers to the god-awful world of highly disorganized music, as well as confuse devoted fans and upset academics, which is always a good thing. However, normal people won't even entertain this shit for a moment, so that's all right, isn't it? Ferguson's Encyclopedia of Unpopular Music has more entries than a $20 whore on a Saturday night, and you can get through each one in less than 5 minutes. Each of the so-called musicians abused here has no real talent or morals, and absolutely no idea that everyone else thinks they're shite. Every man jack of them has the nerve to call themselves artists, and not one of them has the decency to shut up now and then and let someone else have a go. Indeed, they should all just sit down and shut the fuck up. They're just making dickheads of themselves and annoying everyone else. They're bastards. In Ferguson's Encyclopedia of Unpopular Music, you'll meet the so-called big names and feel like you want to punch them in the face. This priceless documentary offers over 20 half-finished biographies of several minor figures in unpopular music. It includes out-of-date activities of the stars, incomplete and inaccurate listings of some of the singers' songs, and a half-assed attempt at a discussion of styles. The author has spent over 15 minutes collecting information and interviewing himself in preparation for the book, and many personal facts about the stars have been invented for the first or second time, especially for you, sweet cheeks. It is Ferguson's insincere wish that you enjoy the work poorly presented here. If you do not enjoy this work, however, it is his desire that you go fuck yourself sideways with a huge banana. Ferguson's Encyclopedia of Unpopular Music will be useless as a source documentary for facts, a checklist for records and activities, and as a scrapbook of the stars, pictures and life stories. It may provide invaluable, however, if you need to turn up something loud to drown out the neighbours bonking next door. Until that day, pull up a chair, pull down your pants, crack open a bottle of strong booze, consult a medical practitioner and take a listen to this shit. You won't believe it. I know I don't.